I had never been much of an outdoors person, but Amy was into hiking, and I wanted to impress her. So, for our third date, we decided to go on a moonlit hike through Whispering Woods, a place known for its eerie silence and dense, shadowy trees. Amy was excited. She had been there before and swore it was magical at night. As we entered the woods, the temperature dropped, and an unsettling quiet wrapped around us. Our flashlights flickered in the dark, casting long, ominous shadows. We walked for a while, chatting, but then something strange happened. The usual sounds of the forest, crickets, rustling leaves vanished. It was as if the woods were holding their breath. Amy squeezed my hand and smiled, but it didn't feel right. The silence was suffocating, and that's when I heard it. Barely audible whispers coming from deeper in the forest. I stopped, convinced it was my mind playing tricks on me. "Did you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Amy paused, her smile fading. "No. What did you hear?" The whispers grew louder, almost like a conversation, but the words were unintelligible. I shined my flashlight toward the source of the sound, and my heart nearly stopped. Between the trees, I saw fleeting shadows, figures moving just beyond the light's reach. "Let's go back," I muttered, pulling Amy close. But she resisted. "No, wait. We're almost at the clearing. Trust me, you'll love it." I didn't argue, even though every instinct told me to leave. As we ventured deeper, the whispers intensified. My breath quickened. I turned my flashlight in every direction, but all I saw were fleeting shapes, like people hiding just out of sight. Then we reached the clearing and I froze. In the center was an ancient stone circle, crumbling and overgrown with vines. And standing inside it was a man. No, not a man. He was pale, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. His body twitched unnaturally, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Amy turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Isn't it beautiful?" Before I could respond, the man stepped toward us. His lips moved, and suddenly the whispers weren't distant anymore. They were inside my head. A cold terror washed over me. I grabbed Amy's arm, but she didn't budge. "Amy, we need to go," I shouted, but she didn't move. She only smiled, her eyes glassy and distant. Then she whispered, "He's been waiting for you." I ran. I don't remember how I made it out of those woods, but I never looked back. I never saw Amy again. The police found no trace of her or the strange man. Whispering Woods is still there, and people still go missing. And sometimes, late at night, I can still hear those whispers, calling me back. It started out like any other date. I met Sarah at a local coffee shop, and we hit it off right away. She was fun, quirky, and had an infectious laugh. After a couple of hours, I suggested we continue the night with dinner. She agreed, and we found a cozy little restaurant just a few blocks away. Dinner was great, the conversation flowed, and everything seemed perfect, until we left the restaurant. As we stepped outside, I noticed the streetlights were flickering. The usually busy street was deserted, and a strange fog had rolled in, thick and heavy. Something about it felt off. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She giggled, grabbing my hand and pulled me toward her car. "Let's go for a drive," she said, her voice soft and playful. I hesitated, but her smile was so warm, so inviting. I couldn't say no. We drove aimlessly through the fog. The streets became unfamiliar, even though we hadn't left the area. The houses, the buildings, everything looked distorted, as if we had slipped into another world. I glanced at Sarah, but she seemed unfazed, humming softly to herself. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Don't worry," she whispered. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" She didn't answer. The road stretched endlessly in front of us, and the fog grew thicker, swallowing everything in sight. My heart pounded as a growing sense of dread settled in. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Sarah, stop the car," she turned to me, her face eerily calm. "It's too late now." Suddenly the car screeched to a halt. The fog parted, revealing a massive, crumbling mansion at the end of a dirt road. It looked abandoned, its windows dark and empty, but something about it felt alive. Sarah got out of the car without a word and walked toward the house. I tried to follow, but my legs felt heavy, like I was walking through quicksand. She disappeared into the mansion and the door slammed shut behind her. I stood there frozen, unsure of what to do. That's when I saw them, figures in the fog, slowly moving toward me. Their faces were blank, their eyes hollow, and they made no sound as they approached. Panicking, I ran toward the mansion, hoping to find Sarah. I pounded on the door, but it wouldn't open. The figures were closer now, their outstretched hands reaching for me. In a desperate attempt, I rammed my shoulder into the door, and it flew open. Inside, the house was dark, cold, and deathly silent. I could barely see, but I heard faint footsteps upstairs. I followed the sound, climbing the creaky staircase to the second floor. Every step felt like a weight dragging me down. At the top, I found a long hallway with dozens of doors, all closed. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment everything was still. Then one of the doors creaked open. I stepped inside and froze. There was Sarah, standing in the middle of the room. But she wasn't alone. Standing around her were the figures from the fog, their blank faces staring straight at me. And Sarah, she was smiling, her eyes black as coal. "Welcome home," she whispered. The door slammed shut behind me. Lily had always been full of surprises, but when she suggested a candlelit dinner at her place for our second date, I was thrilled. It sounded intimate, romantic, perfect. I arrived at her apartment, greeted by the soft glow of candles and the faint scent of lavender. The table was set with fine china, and everything seemed perfect. She looked stunning, smiling at me as she invited me in. As we ate, the conversation was easy, the food delicious. But there was something strange. The candlelight flickered oddly, casting unsettling shadows on the walls, and every now and then I'd catch Lily glancing over my shoulder, her smile faltering. It was quick, barely noticeable, but enough to make me uneasy. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," she replied, her voice a little too cheerful, just thinking. Thinking about what, I wondered. But I didn't press. We finished dinner and she offered to give me a tour of her apartment. It was small but cozy, with an eclectic mix of decorations. The hallway leading to her bedroom was lined with old portraits, none of which I recognized. Each painting depicted a person, but their eyes seemed to follow me as I walked by. "Who are these people?" I asked, my voice shaky. Lily hesitated. "Just family." Something about her tone sent a chill down my spine. I glanced back at the paintings. Their expressions were unnerving, almost angry. The flickering candlelight made it seem like they were moving, their faces shifting ever so slightly. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me like a second skin. As we entered her bedroom, I noticed an old wooden chest at the foot of her bed. It looked out of place, ancient, worn, and covered in strange symbols. "What's in the chest?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily's smile faded. "Nothing you need to worry about." But I couldn't take my eyes off it. Something about that chest. It felt wrong, like it didn't belong in this world. I stepped closer, drawn to it. "Don't!" Lily warned, her voice sharp. I stopped, but the curiosity gnawed at me. "What's in there?" She stared at me, her eyes dark and unreadable. "You really don't want to know." Before I could respond, the candles in the room went out, plunging us into darkness. The temperature dropped, and I heard a faint scratching sound, like nails dragging across wood. "Lily?" I whispered, but she didn't answer. The scratching grew louder, and I realized it was coming from the chest. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone to use as a light. When I finally turned it on, I nearly dropped it. The chest was open, and something was crawling out. It was small at first, like a shadow, but it grew, stretching and contorting into a twisted humanoid shape. Its face was featureless, but I could feel its gaze on me, cold and malevolent. It reached out with long, spindly fingers, moving toward me. "Lily!" I shouted, backing away from the thing crawling out of the chest. My voice echoed in the pitch-black room, but she remained silent. I pointed my phone's light at the bed, desperate to find her, but she was gone. Vanished. The creature from the chest moved faster now, its limbs bending at unnatural angles as it crept across the floor. I scrambled backward, my pulse hammering in my ears. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing colder, thicker, as if the room itself was suffocating me. I bolted for the door, but the shadows twisted, wrapping around the frame, as if the entire apartment had come alive. The scratching sound was everywhere now, inside my head, under my skin. I could feel it, cold, sharp nails dragging across my bones. And then, Lily spoke. "Don't run," she whispered, her voice coming from the darkness, everywhere and nowhere at once. "It won't let you leave." The thing from the chest was right in front of me now, rising up to its full height. Its featureless face leaned in close, so close I could feel its icy breath against my skin. My hand gripped the door handle, but it wouldn't turn. Panic surged through me, and I slammed my shoulder against the door, desperate to escape. "Lily, what is this?" I screamed. Her voice was calm, detached. "It's part of the family." The door finally gave way, and I stumbled into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. But the scratching didn't stop. It was louder, more frantic, as if the creature was trying to claw its way through the door. I ran down the hallway, past the eerie portraits with their angry, staring eyes, and into the living room. The candles on the dinner table were still flickering, casting long, unsettling shadows across the room. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers trembling, but as I reached for the front door, the shadows on the walls began to shift. Figures, vague, dark shapes started to materialize, their limbs elongating, their movements slow and deliberate. They crawled along the walls, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The door. I had to get to the door. Just as I reached for the handle, something cold and slimy wrapped around my ankle. I looked down, and my heart nearly stopped. A shadowy hand, formed from the darkness itself, was gripping me, pulling me back. "Lily!" I screamed again, but the only response was the soft, eerie laughter that filled the room. The figures closed in, and I could feel their cold breath on my neck, their hollow eyes piercing through me. I kicked at the shadow gripping my leg, desperate to break free. My mind was a blur of fear, my body trembling with adrenaline. Suddenly, the front door burst open, flooding the room with a blinding white light. The shadows recoiled, hissing as they melted back into the walls. I didn't wait to see what was coming next. I ran out, into the cold night air, gasping for breath as the world outside felt surreal, silent, still, almost normal. I turned back to Lily's apartment, but there was no sign of her. The door was closed, the lights were off, and everything looked ordinary. But I knew better. That thing, whatever it was, had been real. And Lily, whatever she was, had known all along. I didn't call the police. What would I even tell them? Instead, I drove home, every nerve on edge, my mind racing with questions I was too terrified to answer. I never heard from Lily again. Her number was disconnected, her apartment empty when I returned in daylight. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and the shadows stretch long, I still hear it, the scratching. I know it's waiting for me.